Today, the Supreme Court decided that ICE can profile people based on race, ethnicity, and speaking Spanish. I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version in case you haven't been following this story. Essentially, back in July, an LA judge decided that the ICE raids had to stop because there was a, quote, mountain of evidence that they were violating people's constitutional rights by rounding people up and detaining them simply for being brown and speaking Spanish. So today, the higher court, the Supreme Court, blocked that lower court decision, which means the ICE raids will amplify again. I need you to understand that the reason an officer can't just say you looked at them funny and then throw you behind in jail is because the Fourth Amendment protects you against unreasonable searches and seizures. This applies to citizens and non-citizens. Hopefully I don't have to explain why it is both a constitutional crisis and an attack on democracy if this amendment is not being respected. The checks and balances are no longer in the room with us. The Supreme Court is fully doing the bidding of the executive branch.
So I want to say how these Latinos, how these Latinos and how the people of America will react to this racial profiling. So I want you to watch this video or this clip that I've compiled till the end. Then I'll come again and give a candid insight about the issue. So don't forget to stick till the end.
Yesterday, the Supreme Court granted a stay of injunction towards immigration enforcement, claiming that the following factors, in combination or simply by themselves, justify reasonable suspicion of questionable citizenship status. These factors include presence at particular locations such as bus stops, car washes, day labor pickup sites, agricultural sites, and the like, the type of work one does, speaking Spanish or speaking English with an accent, and apparent race or ethnicity. According to Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh, the government contends that the injunction will substantially hamper its efforts to enforce the immigration laws in the Los Angeles area. What does this mean? It means essentially that if immigration cannot racially profile people, then they can't do their job. This is ridiculous. You can't determine that someone is reasonably suspicious of being a non-citizen based off of their apparent race or ethnicity, nor from the language that they speak or the accent that they have. Let me provide an example. If someone speaks a language that you don't understand, that does not constitute reasonable suspicion that they're not from the United States. You could arrest someone because they sound foreign, only to find out that they're a native Gullah speaker. Gullah is a Creole that originates in the United States with African roots. It's where we get words like bussin', tote, gumbo, kumbaya. You know who's a native Gullah speaker? Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who voted in favor of this decision. That's the frustrating thing. The reason why we don't profile people based off of their race and ethnicity and the language that they speak is because it is not an accurate assessment as to whether or not someone's a citizen. Already, we've had 15 members of the Navajo Nation in Arizona and New Mexico being detained and questioned by ICE. We've had 3 members of the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate tribe being detained without cause despite the fact that they presented IDs. And yet, Kavanaugh is claiming here that there isn't significant standing nor concern about using race as an effective metric for determining whether or not someone is suspicious of being a non-citizen. Later on in his concurrence, Kavanaugh says here, to be clear, apparent ethnicity alone cannot furnish reasonable suspicion. Under this court's case law regarding immigration stops, however, it can be a relevant factor when considered along with other salient factors. Under this court's precedents, not to mention common sense, I hate that phrase in legal discourse, it's incredibly subjective, those circumstances taken together can constitute at least reasonable suspicion of a legal presence in the United States. Kavanaugh is saying here that race and ethnicity is a factor when determining how suspicious someone is. That is racial profiling. That is racism. In the United States, we do have a problem that is endemic where we associate trustworthiness with skin tone. It is something that can be seen over and over again. It is often very intuitive and implicit, and people don't realize that they're applying that metric. You can go to other countries, certain parts of East Asia, and you'd be surprised how that mentality is not there. It is like night and day. It's very different. But here, Kavanaugh is saying that race and ethnicity can be a relevant factor, that the language that you're speaking can be a relevant factor when determining reasonable suspicion. That is racial profiling. That is racism. Later in his concurrence, Kavanaugh says something incredibly idealistic in my opinion, claiming that there isn't anything to worry about regarding immigration enforcement. Moreover, as for stops for those individuals who are legally in the country, the questioning in those circumstances is typically brief, and those individuals may promptly go free after making clear to the immigration officers that they are U.S. citizens or otherwise legally in the United States. However, in the dissent by Justice Sotomayor, she highlights several anecdotes of that very clearly not being the case, such as the case of Jorge Viramontes. On one occasion, an agent questioned Viramontes, asking if he is a citizen and requesting that he show his ID. Viramontes replied that he is a dual U.S. and Mexican citizen and supplied his California driver's license. The agent said the ID was insufficient, grabbed his arm, escorted him to a vehicle, and drove him to a warehouse area for further questioning. In Glendale, nearly a dozen masked agents with guns jumped out of cars at a Home Depot and began chasing and tackling Latino day laborers without identifying themselves as ICE or police, asking questions, or saying anything else. In downtown Los Angeles, agents jumped out of a van, rushed up to a tamale vendor, surrounded him, and handled him violently, all without asking any questions. On a broader scale, however, how many U.S. citizens have been unlawfully arrested, detained, or deported by ICE this year? Well, we have no official information on that. The DHS claims that number is 0. However, from the Government Accountability Office in 2021, I've found this information here, that from 2015 to 2020, ICE arrested 674, detained 121, and removed 70 potential U.S. citizens from the United States. Kavanaugh is effectively stating that immigration enforcement cannot do their job unless they're allowed to racially profile people, questioning people's legal status based off of their apparent race or ethnicity, or if they're speaking Spanish or English with an accent, which is not a determinant of citizenship. Speaking Spanish doesn't mean that you're a non-citizen, nor does speaking English mean that you are a citizen. What's so insulting about making sure that these agencies are allowed to use Spanish as a way to profile people as being non-citizens is that there are so many Americans in California, Arizona, and New Mexico who have had family ties to this land prior to U.S. annexation following the Mexican-American War in 1848. There are people who have been here longer than the English speakers, and yet they are the ones being questioned about their citizenship status. Now, this case is still pending appeal in the Ninth Circuit, but it is really unnecessary for the Supreme Court to grant a stay of injunction. It is an act of injustice, and there are reasons why we don't allow for racial profiling when it comes to law enforcement in this country.
So the United States Supreme Court finally gave their verdict, right, on the situation that's going on in Los Angeles. And they decided to allow ICE to resume the racially profiling of all Hispanic Latinos in the Los Angeles area under the suspicion that they just might be illegal immigrants. They don't actually have to prove it. The federal judge who had temporarily blocked ICE being able to do that, stated that it should not be constitutional considering that there is no reasonable doubt. But now the Supreme Court is stating that there doesn't need to be any reasonable doubt. As long as you look Latino, we're going to assume that you're Latino and you're going to get detained. Stop and frisk 2.0, anybody? Stop and frisk 2.0? Because that's exactly what the fuck it sounds like. It sounds like stop and frisk 2.0. And considering that I think it was over 60% of Hispanics and Latinos voted for Donald Trump to get into office to reclaim a second term, good for you. Good for you. Because I don't know what it's going to take for you to finally realize that anything that happens to any other marginalized group here in America, best believe that it happened to Black people first. It happened to Black people first. So when Black people are fighting for it to not happen to them, it's because they're fighting for it to not happen to anybody else. But you guys were completely content with this happening to Black people because you had your little proximity to whiteness. Now that you realize, listen, they can racially profile you too. Now you guys want to cry out. If only you listened when the Black people were trying to tell you that this was going to happen. Them having firsthand experience, especially as me being a Black person here in New York City. Do you know how many times when stop and frisk was first introduced, how many times I got stopped at the fucking train station, them wanting to check my bag, all because I was a Black woman? That's it. Mind you, I had any type of indication that I'd be a criminal. I'm literally on my way to work or school, but I was being stopped. You guys wanted that. When we were crying out, stating that we were being racially profiled, which also introduces the higher probability of police brutality, because if I know I'm being detained and I didn't do anything, how the hell do you expect me to actually be calm, right? We were trying to tell you guys about that. What did you say? Oh, if you're not a criminal, you don't have nothing to worry about. You don't have to worry about that. Well, now if you're legal, you have nothing to worry about, right? It should be the same thing. Same concept applies. Oh, Donald Trump is going to look out for us. Donald Trump isn't going to do that to us. Donald Trump isn't going to do this to us. Now look what Donald Trump is doing to you. Look what they're doing to you. And it's not even just Donald Trump. He has the backing of the Supreme Court. They're allowed to just racially profile you. It doesn't even matter. Not only are they able to come into areas that they weren't allowed to come into, like hospital, churches, you understand, safe areas. Now they're able to raid that. And not just raid it, it doesn't even matter anymore. They don't need no warrant. They don't need no probable cause. They don't need nothing. All you got to do is look Hispanic, look Latino. That's it. Mind you, you guys' looks, It's very noticeable. Trust me. It's very noticeable. It is. And now that's all they need. That's all they need. So when Black people are telling you something, maybe now you'll heed to their warnings. You'll heed to their warnings. Black people have been the only group of people that will fight for every other group of people. But anytime they finally need that in return, you guys are so quick to turn your backs on them and go in favor for your own interests. Even when you were going to vote against your own interests, Black people were telling you that's what you were doing, but you didn't want to believe them. You didn't want to believe them. I don't know how you thought these mass deportations were going to take place. How did you think it was going to take place? Especially considering they were laying off all these federal workers. How did you think it was going to happen? How do you think they were going to make these numbers? They have to just grab y'all. They just have to grab y'all. That's it. There's no time to see who's really supposed to be detained and not. No. They rally you all up. Y'all look the part, that's it.
So today, a day of heavy memories, America is facing a new crisis. The Supreme Court just gave Trump's deportation machine a blank check, a 6-3 ruling that legalizes racial profiling. Let's be clear, these raids aren't about border security. They're about state violence, rooted in white supremacy. If you are ready to resist, smash that like button, subscribe, and let's expose this ruling. So here is what happened. So the other day on September 8th, the High Court, or the court conservative majority, lifted a block on ICE, the so-called roving patrols in Los Angeles. So the lower court had issued or had said these stops were so unconstitutional, but without explaining, the 6 judges gave the ICE the green light. This means, or that means, skin color, the accent, or even working construction in construction can now be probable cause, and you will be acquitted for one who is in America illegally. Justice Sotomayor warned these MAGA Latinos, quote, fair game to be seized at any time. So sad. Now Trump is celebrating, vowing to deport around 3,000 immigrants in a day. So this is not law enforcement. This is a state sanction of racism, or racism come dressed in a suit. The targets are working class Latinos, very people who keep the economy or the country or major cities running. Since June, ICE raid has been happening in bus stops, schools, even home depot, parking lots, and often with the guns drawn. And this guys uses excessive force. I think you guys have seen, even if you resist, they will just put you down. US citizens have been detained simply for looking undocumented. Communities are now living in fear. Children skipping schools, workers disappearing, families are hiding. This is not about safety, it's about control, keeping black and brown people in the crosshair, while the healthy or while the wealthy profit. Let's talk about what's happening in LA. You've seen the economy of Los Angeles. You've seen the nights of Los Angeles being like a ghost town, a haunted town. There's no activity at night. The economy is crumbling. Thanks to who? The Donald Trump and the ICE. So this ruling fits a long, ugly pattern, from slave patrol to stop and frisk, from the war on drugs to mass incarceration. Now, Trump is turning that same machinery on Latinos. Think of the Chinese Exclusion Act, Operation Wetback, family separations in 2018. White nationalism has always been thrived by dividing the oppressed, dividing the black, dividing the brown, dividing the Latinos, driving enmity between the Latinos and the brown. But our strength comes from unity, black and brown, solidarity against power, authoritarian power. That's why these raids are militarized. That's why the National Guard is on the streets. That's why the National Guards will take you anytime, despite what? Resisting. This is not about the law. This is about control and fear. And here's the kicker. These raids are backfiring very bad. The economy is rising. The number of jobs, are reducing. Construction sites, farms, restaurants, they are grinding to a halt. Business can't function without immigrant labor. At the same time, Trump was weakening the environment protection while fueling division and hate. You have seen the revised job data, which shows that America didn't create those many jobs, and even wonder, the Bureau of Statistics or Labor Bureau of Statistics director who was fired. It was all political. This won't make America great. It will bankrupt communities, push foreclosure, and fascism. That's why we demand, and make ICE responsible. They should not harm innocent people. They should repair the justice. Comrades, this is the American moment. Those join those what they were calling music festivals. Demand justice. Pressure the reps. Those are Republican reps that are pushing for these military National Guards to be in the street. The midterm is coming. Show them dust. The booing is not okay. And no, the booing is not enough. We need more booing. We need more people on the street. Pressurize your leaders. Pressurize those Democratic leaders. Make those Republican leaders accountable and see that America is returned to its glory. So tell me what you think about this video in the comment section. If you've seen or you've not understand, kindly make sure you comment so that we can get back to you. Also, guys, don't forget to join my membership. It's in the link bio. So if you join this membership, I will get to know one-to-one chat, and if you join this membership, I'll be offering free Swahili lessons, every Saturday, so that you guys can be bilingual. You guys can know how to interact with this very beautiful language. Till next time, thank you.